So, hello there, everyone. Welcome to the long awaited WTM dinner. I am so glad to have all of you here. I hope you guys are on time. I hope everyone can see me. I hope everyone can hear me. I'm really looking forward to today's session. We have such a good lineup of speakers joining us today. So just stay tuned and we'll have a really good session. So we're going to kick off with a few introductions of our keynote speaker from Irene. But just before that, a little bit of housekeeping. So kindly, this session is recorded and it's a live session. So there could be a bit of some technical hitches, technical difficulties, and we'd like to apologize in advance in case any of that come on our way. So without any further ado, Irene, I welcome you to the stage. Hello, Irene. You there?
So yeah.
Hi, Irene.
Hi. So thank you so much, Gaty, for the warm welcome. And yeah, I'll just like to introduce our first keynote speaker, Jackie. So Jackie is the Geo Program Manager at Google. I just hope every one of you is able to see me. I'm struggling with the camera and everything else. But Jackie is the Geo Program Manager at Google. She has been with Google for 12 years and started in the Kenyan office when Google began building the first Google-owned maps for Africa. She was part of the team that built the first maps, which covered Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania. With the launch of the initial content in these countries, she was involved in expanding maps data coverage across Africa and launching maps domain in all of Africa. She was then involved in growing maps capabilities by building and launching key features such as driving and walking directions, Google Maps for mobile for Africa, turn-by-turn voice navigation in select markets, and the first dynamic transit layer in Africa for Lagos. So she was also involved in growing the users and use cases of maps through the Ladies Map apps and Korogosho mapping project, both which were replicated in multiple countries. So yeah, Jackie's she was most recently on the Geo Data Operations team, looking after the accuracy of Google Maps Local Data Index. Some of our notable roles in Google Maps include the Geo Field Operations Lead for EMEA, running multiple million-dollar operations projects in Russia, South Africa, Nigeria, adding 500,000 listings to Google Maps. The operations lead for Nigeria, as well as also an emerging markets-based map and strategy leads. So something else about Jackie is she is also a Pan-Africanist and passionate about side hustles such as agriculture and empowerment. She has a BSc in geomatic engineering from JKUAT and currently pursuing an MSc in systems engineering management from University College London. In her free time, she runs a side hustle business fundraiser for Kenyan nonprofits, mentors 20% entrepreneurs, girls, women, and people of color. So we are so excited and happy to have Jackie with us. So I'll just hand it over to her if she's part of the. She's here with us already. So Jackie, over to you. And yeah, it's such an honor to have you today with us. Hey, Jackie, are you?
Yes. Hi.
Hi. Nice to finally meet you.
Good to meet you as well. I initially had a presentation, so I'm not sure if I should do a presentation or just talk through.
Yeah, sure. Feel free to do a presentation or just any other way.
Okay, let me try and share my screen. Can you see the screen I'm sharing?
Not yet, just Yeah, I think it's loading.
If it's not working, it's fine. I can just talk through without.
Yeah, maybe you can just try one more time. I think it would also be exciting to just go through the slides and, you know, just follow through. But if it doesn't work, we'll just continue without the presentation.
Okay. Try again. I have selected share screen. It says it's sharing my screen, but it's not displaying.
Okay. Just a minute. Okay, I think we just get started in case it's not picking up.
Okay.
Okay.
Screen. Not working at all. Okay. Oh, no.
Hello, ladies. What seems to be the problem?
It's not picking up my screen share.
Oh, okay. Have you tried?
There it is.
Oh, nice. Now it's
working.
now we can see it. Perfect.
Right.
Yeah. So I think over to you, Jackie.
Awesome. Thank you so much, and apologies for technical difficulties. So hi, everyone. As mentioned, I'm Jackie Rajwai, or my friends call me Raj, so I go by Raj as well. I'm a geo program manager. I'm currently based in the Ireland office, and the theme for the event, I know, is Think Equal, Build Smart, and Innovate for Change, hashtag Balance for Better. But I'm going to try and weave this into my personal story in terms of my journey into STEM, my journey into Google as well, the over 12, it's now 13 years at Google, and kind of walk through my career. Yes, so basically that's going to be what I'll go through. So I'm Kenyan. Hopefully that was obvious. If not, my last name can be confusing. And so I was born and raised in Nairobi, and technically it's Kajiado County, it's Ngong, so it's a border county, border town. But yes, but we insist to be part of Nairobi. And so my journey into STEM was very accidental. I'm the last born of 4 kids. All my elder siblings are boys, and they were always very clear as to what they wanted to do in life. They always had a plan. They were going to be engineers. That was done from the get-go. I was not as sure, but because I always struggled to fit in with the boys, my way of fitting in was whatever they can do, I can do it better. And hence, when they were all declaring their how they're going to be engineers, I was like, well, I can do that too. And that's how I ended up in STEM, or with an interest in STEM anyway. So I went to university in JKUAT, where I went to study geomatic engineering, which essentially is, in some universities, called geomatic and geospatial engineering. But they basically took surveying and merged it with elements of engineering, civil engineering, to be able to give a more rounded feel to the field of study. And also a huge part of that was also geographic information systems. So that brought in my initial interaction with tech and information systems, but more from a spatial perspective. So when engineering is 5 years in Kenya, on the day we were graduating, Google sent an email to the department in school, and Google was now just opening their first office in Africa, which was going to be Nairobi. And their first plan was to build the maps for Africa, because at that point, when you look at Google Maps for African countries, there really wasn't much, because a lot of our maps content was licensed, and the company or entity they were licensing from didn't have much content for Africa. So the idea was we're just going to build everything from scratch. And so they wanted people who had a spatial information background. So when the email came to our department and was sent around to everyone in our graduating class, I initially didn't think it was a real thing. So I didn't bother applying. And again, I didn't really have a life plan. So my plan was to stay in academia until I figure out life and corporate world. So I was very scared of going into corporate world. So a good chunk, a few of my friends applied. We're going through the interviews, and they kept calling me and telling me, hey, this thing is real, you should apply. So long story short, one of my friends twisted my arm and I sent in my resume, and 3 interviews, and 2 weeks later, I got a job offer to join Google. And initially my role when joining Google was going to be as a temp. I wasn't going to be a full-time employee. And so I decided to put I already signed up for a master's. I had a scholarship to go study in the US. So I put that on hold for a year and decided I'm just going to give this corporate world thing a try for a year. If I don't like it, I'll just go back into academia. If I like it, I could review and see. And so that's how my entrance into Google happened. And so, as mentioned, we're trying to build the maps for Africa. So the Google Maps you see for Nairobi, before this is even after like a few weeks of mapping, but it was basically nothing. And it was building a lot of this data from scratch. There was a huge team in India that used to do a lot of the mapping work. And we used to bring in the local knowledge in terms of like the quality assurance and things like that. So we were able to build the maps for Nairobi over time. And it was really fascinating seeing that time lapse of what you could do over a few weeks into kind of what you see now with the additional features, right? And so around 6-7 months in, the manager at the time, because we had built a good amount of data in terms of the main cities in in Kenya, and I believe Uganda or Tanzania at the time, we had decided that we were going to actually do a public push and launch of maps to the public domain, so they can be able to see the work that was being done. And that's the first time I got assigned a large responsibility, which required managing different stakeholders and working with marketing to figure out how do we market this thing, working with engineering, figuring out what the launch event would look like, etc. And so we were able to launch maps in Kenya, and that was my first, leadership responsibility. The interesting thing that many people don't know is on the day of launch, when we were opening the domain and talking to media houses and being like, okay, our maps is live, maps crashed. So what we had done is we had taken a screenshot in case something happens. And so what was publicized to media houses on that day was actually a screenshot, because maps just died on us, but we're able to fix it. But that was my first experience being able to work on something that had so many different stakeholders and felt like owning something. And that specific one event had a huge downstream effect to my career, in that after that, it was coming on 9 months of being at Google, and I knew I only had 2 or 3 more months before I decided if I was going to leave and go back into pursuing my master's or staying in the corporate world. And one of the internal recruiters reached out to me and said, given that they've had a lot of feedback about my leadership abilities, that they would want me to stay on as a full-time employee. So around 9 months in, I was converted into a full-time employee. And then my one experience doing a launch event led into experience of being a huge part of launching the domains for the rest of the African countries. Again, so working with different teams around like how do we ensure that the maps relate to local people and how that works. And so I worked on that. And then beyond that, I started now going more into a lot of the technical work. So we had launched Maps, the content, but users wanted to also be able to have the same features that every other user has when they use Maps. They want directions, they want navigation. So again, my curiosity made me ask my manager at the time, like, hey, why can't we launch driving directions? And they were like, well, usually that's data, you need to have a specific kind of data to be able to launch. And my question was like, well, what's the threshold? So how do we know we've gotten to a quality that's good enough for us to launch? And the manager said, well, go figure it out. And well, I went and figured it out. And so we just literally came up with, on the fly, with ways to be able to test how do you make sure directions are good. And so it was working with engineering and just coming up with innovative ways to be able to figure out like how do we do this? Because on my end, I wanted to be able to make sure people who are using maps on the continent are getting the same experience as if you're using maps in the US, right? So it may not go the same way that it requires to go, but for me, it was more figuring out a way. And so we were able to eventually launch driving directions based on that project in Kenya. And then after seeing it live for a few months and seeing, hey, we didn't break anything and things are working well, we were able to expand this into other countries. And this happened for driving directions and worked for walking directions. And then I also started observing that when we had a lot of events, a lot of the events, there was very few women represented. And again, my curiosity asking, hey, what if we just do an event and say, let's make it focused on women, will they come? And we had huge turnout, and that birthed the beginning of also bringing together women to help map or add content to maps. This is back when we had a project called MapMaker. And so that was the beginning first few years in Kenya. And then towards the end of maybe it was about 2-3 years, my manager approached me at the time and said, hey, Nairobi is a small office. I work remotely a lot with the folks who are based in India and Hyderabad. And so he said, you would benefit from moving to India for a year and just seeing what it looks like to set up a team and to work with much larger teams. It's faster paced. You have people, and at the time we had expanded. The work we were doing in Africa was expanded into what we call the emerging markets, which are other countries outside of Africa that also have similar profile to African markets. And so I thought, well, hey, I have nothing to lose. So I packed my bags and moved to India for a year, where it was a really exciting experience. Having to set up a team and like trying to figure out what the scope of this team would be. Do we have enough work? Does it make sense? And so I was able to set up a team, and a year in, towards the year ending, my VP at the time approached and said, hey, since that you've had experience working outside of the country and in a fast-paced environment, going back to Nairobi might feel like, because the much smaller office may feel different. If you're open to moving elsewhere, I'm going to reach out to you. And I said, I'm actually open to it. And true enough, a few months later, a role came up in West Africa. Nigeria and West Africa in general was becoming a big focus, and they needed somebody on the ground who could be able to help with operations. And so after I'd just moved back from India for a few months, I packed my bags again and I moved to Lagos, Nigeria. Where I helped head up our West African operations. But that also included like being able to help launch transit directions and work around that, but also working in the market and being able to translate what the market looks like to product teams to be able to ensure that we actually are building things that reflect the market itself. Around towards the end of the 2 years, I was in Lagos, maybe around 1 year and 6-7 months in, I knew that I would have wanted to leave or move again. I really wasn't clear where my next move was going to be. But around the same time, emerging markets had proven itself, and they had felt that we are big enough to be absorbed into the global Google Maps teams, and ensure that that the markets we're working on are now represented on a global platform. And the team I was absorbed to happened to have their EMEA base in Dublin. And so when I was asked if I'm interested in moving to Dublin to be based with the main team here, again, packed my bags, and I moved to Dublin. And when I moved to Dublin, I was I was working on a local data accuracy, so our local data index, and ensuring that when users are looking for whether it's business listings or any point of interest information, the accuracy we're able to feed to the users, the quality is good, but also working with internal teams to make sure that all the different algorithms or platforms that are seeding this information are also seeding the right information. And also when I moved to Dublin, Dublin is, or I guess Ireland as a country is new to immigration. So there was very few Black people when I moved here, and especially in the Google office. So I did also continue my passion of working, because previously in the African markets, I used to do a lot of work with women. So when I moved to Dublin, I quickly recognized that the people of color are truly underrepresented here. And so I also joined what we call the Black Googler Network. It's one of our employee resource groups, which I was leading until end of last year, where I stepped down from that piece. But I'll talk a bit more about the challenges of being a person of color in a few slides down. So then while I'm here, I did my interest in academia, and I finishing my master's. I was like, maybe I should go back and do that master's. And so I signed up for a master's program in London at University College of London. And it's a degree that I still need to finish. It is haunting me. My mom is haunting me every day. But yeah, that is something that it will be completed in the next few months. So just kind of to go into what my role or my job is as a program manager, and program managers at Google in general, so program managers have a very wide range of backgrounds. I always tell people, whether you're if you're heavily in tech or heavily in engineering, but you also want to figure out what options there are, program management is a really good stepping stone into that space. And so because of the wide background as well, a good chunk of our work is leading very complex and multidisciplinary programs. And we work with teams a lot. So a lot of our work requires like navigating conflict. You have to build consensus, collaborating with different teams, and ensuring folks are focused on what the end game is. The skills involved in program management problem solving is key. And this is where my engineering background really has helped, is that you're always just trying to figure out solutions, right? Navigating or thriving in ambiguity. Ambiguity, I always say, is like my favorite playing ground. Being able to have to come up with ideas and figure out how do you resolve this thing, how do you do this thing, is a space that I am very comfortable in. And the usual project management and just getting things done. So I'd mentioned when I moved to Dublin, I was working with the geodata organization, who was looking after the accuracy of our local data index. Early this year in January, I made the move out of that team, and I'm now in what is known as the Geo for Everyone team, and under which we have a product called Plus Codes, where I'm responsible for our global strategy, go-to-market strategy for Plus Codes. And Plus Codes essentially is a digital addressing solution, right? So if you think about, Kenya, we don't have physical addressing, right? So a lot of ways we describe places is based on landmarks, and associated or relative descriptions. And Plus Codes are a solution we built based off of latitude and longitude. But the reason I made that move is because I got to a point where I do want to be able to see or work in areas where I can see the changes affecting positively people from my area, so Kenya and Africa. So it was a selfish move on my part, where I want to be able to work towards changing people's lives, right? So I think there is a lot of there's a lot of potential in the digital economy, which we are not able to participate in because of certain things such as infrastructure. And I truly believe in Plasco, the digital addressing, as being a stepping stone in that space. And so when I moved to this team, my goal was to always bring the Kenyan, the African voice to the table, right? So I'm always in there ensuring that, hey, yeah, we've talked to partners in India, we've talked to partners in Brazil, but that is not representative of the African market. We need to make sure we bring African partners to the table and speak to these partners, and we understand and also build solutions for users in African countries. And again, at the point where I've been able to bring and sway our team in that direction, I'm also very clear that Africa is not a monolith. So if we're going to talk to partners in Kenya, that doesn't mean the solution is going to work in Nigeria, or is going to work in South Africa, or work in Uganda. We have to ensure that those are things that are very clear. So sometimes I feel like I'm the not really morality police, but I'm the person in meetings putting my hand up and being like, yeah, but that's all good, but that's not going to work in Kenya. That's not going to work in, let alone across countries. I mean, it can work in Nairobi, it may not work in Kisumu, right? So it's part of that is bringing that to the table and ensuring that representation from a perspective of, if we're thinking about the users and the users are fast, we have to make sure all users are represented. So challenges in terms of my career so far and being in Google the 12, 13 years is prejudice is very real, right? So and I've used a broader term as prejudice, but that could break into other things, whether it's sexism or misogyny or race or racism. That is an actual thing that I have dealt with. And for anyone who's going to play in the multinational or international platform, that is something to expect to deal with, right? And the saying that you have to work twice as hard to be able to prove yourself, that is sometimes, it is probably a reality. But I have gotten to a point where I have been at Google for a long time, and I have been able to build really sort of strong networks in the company. So even as I work on whether within Plasco or within my team, being able to ensure voices are heard, I also do a lot of heavy lifting to ensure that the Black employees who are in either my office, who are able to reach me, are able to have a good experience at Google, and ensuring people that their voices are heard, because that's something that I do know. When I joined Google initially, I did not know, right? It's more, you're like, oh, I'm just grateful to have a job. Oh, I'm just grateful to be here. But at the same time, when this company is high, you are in this company or working in whatever spaces you're working in, you have a skill set that you bring. So being grateful aside, it doesn't mean that you have to take whatever people toss at you, right? So it's a prejudice is something to be prepared for, but it also takes a bit of time and I mean, and to be fair, I can't say I'm the expert in this space, but it takes a lot of time and experience to also be able to learn how to manage. And I mean, unfortunately, to say like pick your battles, but it's one of those things. It's a skill you learn, but then it goes into my second point is, one of my challenges over time is that losing that voice, because I'm somebody who's very opinionated, I'm very stubborn. But I noticed over time, you let things get to you so much that you kind of just like, yeah, let me just get by. Let me just, do the political thing and let that slide, right? But it's one of the things I noticed, I think when I was in Ireland, maybe my third year, and I realized, I mean, I know I don't have a life plan, but it just felt like before I was going towards something, and now I just felt like I was wandering around. So that's something that's real. So being able to have a check-in with yourself to always ensure, like, am I going in the right direction? Does this feel right? Does it not feel right? And then one of the other major challenges I faced, and is something to look out for, is I did not recognize over my career the mentors and sponsors who were showing up. I had no idea, right? And now it's looking back and then realizing, oh yeah, that VP who told me, now that you're leaving India, and I want you to move to somewhere else. And when he had a role open in West Africa, tapped me on the shoulder and say, hey, there's this role in West Africa, I want you to take up that role. I did not know that was a sponsor at that point, right? I mean, I still have a great relationship with him. He's moved on from Google, but it's just things I did not recognize that I could have tapped into much sooner, as well as mentors. And this is not just at Google, but throughout life. There are times, sometimes I'm standing there and thinking, oh, why is this person helping me? I'm not sure, is it? But it's there are moments you have to realize, okay, whatever the person has seen in me, let me recognize what this opportunity is or what the situation is. In terms of learnings, and in terms of and I'll tie this to the theme, especially the last part for innovate for change, is don't be afraid to reinvent and explore, right? Like life is, I know we say life's too short, but it's being stuck in that analysis paralysis of like, should I do, when drawing down all the pros and cons and where I should go and where you don't go. It's sometimes it's just, you're stuck in that so long that the opportunity comes and passes by, and then you look back, you're like, yeah, I should have done that thing. So I mean, don't be afraid to reinvent and explore. I say that all the time. I like to give a personal example. My mom, who at 50 years old, she had worked in government parastatal job where, you know, you get the loans are cheap, you can sit there and you can be fine. And at 50 years old, she was like, oh, no, actually, I've always had a passion for people. And so she, at 50, she went and started a whole new degree and got a master's in counseling psychology and started a counseling practice. My mom is now 65. And last year, she started a whole new business. She used to always make us yogurt when we were growing up. And we used to always tell her, you know, you should be selling yogurt. Yogurt is really good, because our friends used to come over to our houses and get like 5 liters of yogurt every time. And last year in October, she said, you know, actually, yeah, why can't I do this? And so she started a business which is thriving. But again, to her, she's never let that, how old am I? What is, maybe time is, I should just retire and sit back. It's life's too short. If, as long as you have the mental capacity and the space to do it, take those risks, which again goes into my second point. So taking risks, it might work out, it might not work out. There's no guarantee, but I mean, they always say you lose 100% of the shots you don't try. So if you don't try, I mean, then what's the point? And say yes to opportunities. If you look at my career and I look back, even as I'm telling the story of me moving to different offices, those opportunities, they just came to me and I thought, hey, I mean, I have nothing to lose. Let me just go and try. If I go to India for 2 months and I don't like it, I could always come back, right? But these opportunities all led to different stepping stones and have led me to where I'm at career-wise, but also has helped build relationships that I know are going to have changed my life even beyond. If I leave Google now, I know a lot of those relationships that I built through Google and through all these opportunities are definitely going to lead me to much bigger opportunities. And lastly, I was asked to put a note to my younger self as part of this keynote. But yeah, what I would tell myself, my younger self, is to trust my voice all the time. And this is something I now practice every day. And sometimes I'm in meetings with very senior leadership, and I'm like, well, I want to say something. I'm like, yeah, maybe that thought is too dumb. But I'm like, oh no, actually, trust your voice. The fact that came to the forefront, put it out there. If someone disagrees, they'll say it. And 99% of the time, people are like, yeah, that's a really good perspective. I didn't know that. Even if it's just bring my perspective of saying, as somebody who's grown up in Nairobi, this is how we use addresses. So if we do this, it's not going to work out. People are like, actually, that's very true. We never saw that. But trust your voice. That's something that you always have something important to say. I'd also say treasure your family, treasure your relationships. As much as I'm a very career-driven person, I care about learning and challenges, but sometimes it's all not worth it if your family, who are your strongest supporters, and your relationships, your friends, nurture those things. And as women, one of the things I wish I knew much younger, it's only because I only had brothers, but get yourself a good group of girlfriends. Like they'll take you really far. Like it's really important to have a really good group and surrounding of female friends. And the last note I would say is to myself is you're doing amazing. Don't just lean into experiences. As I said, when I said my talk, I don't have a life plan. I still don't have a life plan. If you ask me what I plan to do in 2 years, I don't know. But either way, I feel like, well, I'm going in some direction. It feels right. And so I'd tell my younger self, like, yeah, you're doing good, don't worry. Yeah, and that's I hope I'm within my time, but yes, that's the end of my talk.
Really, really amazing, Jackie. Thank you so much. I think I'm going to remember this, to trust your voice and get yourself the right group. So I think we'll take a few questions from the audience, just at least to like get to hear what exactly do they have to ask Raj. So if you have questions, feel free to post them on the chat section. But I'm going to ask you a question, Raj. When you talk about trusting your voice, would you mind elaborating on that? Because at times, majority of people, women who want to venture into tech and maybe other things, they're like, no, I cannot do this, or I know it might be the right person for this. So how exactly do you deal with that?
Yeah, what do they call it? The imposter syndrome. That I don't know if that ever goes away, to be honest. I literally was I was telling one of my group of my WhatsApp group of girlfriends last week that there's a meeting that happens weekly that has very senior leadership. And because my team right now, we're going through like some of our strategy work. I've happened to be in those meetings for the last 3-4 weeks as a presenter. And sometimes I'm going into the meeting and everyone knows, like, after that meeting, I usually take a nap because it's so draining because you're so stressed and you're preparing and all these things. But then I caught myself in the meeting thinking to myself, like, why am I in here? Like, am I making sense? Like, probably people are thinking, like, what the hell is she saying? What is this? But then at that moment, I'm like, I mean, honestly, these people, if they were there last week and this week they invited me back to present again, and the other week, like, so there must be something I'm doing of value, right? So my negative voice that's being like, what are you, why do they, your voice is not that important. Like, you just have to build, and some of my friends laugh at this, or I don't know if yet, but they've given good feedback is you have to build, it's a very hard exercise, but build a kinder voice to yourself. Because sometimes the voice in our heads is something you'd never say to a friend of yours, right? We are so harsh to ourselves, but you'll never tell your friend, like, why do they have you in that meeting? Like, you're just like, what do you have to say of importance? But then we are so comfortable to have that be the voice in our heads all the time. And that is a very scary thing that I had to learn to train myself to be very kind to myself. Like, even if it's something that's could have been like, yeah, maybe we could have done that better, but yeah, we're human, so it's fine. So just have to build that kind voice, as if, like, imagine that's your best friend and you're having a live conversation. Like, just have that rhetoric in your head, and that really helps you start trusting yourself more.
Wow, interesting. So let your mind be your best friend. Thank you so much, Raj. So there is a question from the audience, and Cindy is asking, how do you perceive discipline?
Oh, how do I perceive discipline? Wow. Okay. Oh, that's a hard one. All right. So I'll take a stab at that one. Okay. So I'm going to assume the question is, how does discipline what role does it play in your life, in your career? How important is that? I want to say it's key, but I'm trying to think I don't know if I'm the most disciplined person I know. Maybe. I think I'm very hard on myself. And this comes from upbringing, and maybe, I guess, because many of us Kenyans, and I think this is common for African parents, African upbringing in general, our parents sometimes are very hard on us growing up. And it's, you're number 2 in class, but they're like, well, did number 1 have 4 eyes? Why weren't you number 1? Or all these things, right? There's a benefit to that, because as an adult, or when, for example, going into university where no one cares about your grades, you've made it to university, now it's just you. That voice, that my parents having to ask, why couldn't you do better, became an inside thing. I guess maybe that builds a discipline in you where you're like, okay, I know nobody's watching, and I know my parents aren't here to ask me, why didn't you do better in this grade? But at the same time, you just keep bringing it builds that inner discipline in you to always be think it to yourself, regardless of whether people are watching me or not, I'm going to do my best, right? Or I'm going to perform better. I'm not going to just try and just pass just enough so that I can make it to the next stage. So I would say discipline is important. I just say be careful as to how you build the incentives for how you create that discipline. That's a part where I think it could get a bit dangerous. But yeah.
Thank you so much. Sorry, Lela had to drop off because of some connection issues.
Yeah.
But we have a question from the audience, from Ruth Ogendi. Good relationship with managers. How did you develop the good relationship with your managers?
That's so funny. So I have not always had a very good relationship with my managers. I just chose to highlight. So how do you develop a good relationship with managers? Okay, so I think over time now, maybe I have learned how to better do this. But I think, again, part of my upbringing and maybe the Kenyan education system I went through is what became a hindrance for me. There's a point in life in my education where you're basically told not to question authority, right? So you don't proactively question things, etc. And then you join a company like Google, that's an American company, and it's all about everyone just throws out your ideas. People can question the CEO or see if we are peers and all these things. And that was a huge culture shock to me. I was like, wait, what? How? Right? And it was very difficult. But then also the repercussions of that were, I would just take what I was being given, right? I was not being proactive in terms of setting my expectations. So the good managers I had, who are, I can count, I've been at Google 13 years. I've probably had over 30 managers, but at top of mind, I can tell you I've had 5 good managers. And to be honest, it was all by chance, right? And it's just people who happened initially. Now I have good managers because I have a really good manager now, but I think it's because I have set the expectation with her. When she became my manager, we sat down and I was like, hey, I want to know what your expectations are of me in terms of how do you work? How do you want me to bring you into my project? So how do you want us to relate? And I also, not just asking, but I also would put forward proactively and say, hey, this is how I work. I do not like to be micromanaged. Or if you asked me to work, if you know I'm working on something, let me reach out to you to check in. Don't ping me every moment and be like, did you do this? Where is this slide? What's missing? So I also had to proactively put on the table, this is how I work. And we had to agree on, okay, largely she was like, yeah, the way you work works with me. But then she's like, yeah, but there's areas like this, because I have to ensure that I also put you forward on platforms where you can have higher visibility, etc. So there are areas you can compromise and say, okay, fine, I see that, let's do that. But that's now, because now I understand, again, the value of my skills that I bring to the table. I'm able now to put this forward. But then before that, a lot of it was literally just pure luck, where I happened to meet a manager where we had the same working style. We had the same deep beliefs and values. And so that helped. But I would say get into the practice of voicing what your expectations are from them as a manager, and then putting forward, this is how I work best. And that will help you, because I think sometimes the bigger friction is you get frustrated because you're like, this person is treating me this way, but you realize you actually never told them how you want to be treated. You never put those expectations forward. So I think there's a practice of how to try and build that good relationship. And then there are people who are just, regardless of what you do, they just maybe are not the greatest managers ever. And that's, I think, a reality many companies have to realize. Not everyone is going to be a good manager, but you can try your best to structure that. So if it's good, it came across as if I had really good managers throughout my career, but let me tell you, and 90% of them were not, I can't even mention, they're not memorable, but the ones who were there, like now I recognize, and I am very good at being able to like build that.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much, Jacqueline. It's usually important to actually see both sides of the swords. For the good managers and the bad managers, actually builds who you are as a person.
Yeah.
So thank you for that. We have, thank you for asking this. What is next for you, Raj? Can you share how you are making that decision? I also really want to know this.
Hey, Anidi. All right. What's next for me? God. Oh my God. What's next for me? Okay. So I think I mentioned that this year that I moved to a team, and I moved to that team based on my passion and my interest. And so I'm not clear on what is next, but I do know whatever happens beyond this, it's going to be tied to my passion. And my passion is Kenya. My passion is Africa. So I'm going to have to do things tied to that. I in my bio it had said I'm a side hustlepreneur. Someone is chicken farming, I'll be in there. And I'm also very political. So I care about too much about politics. But I have come to the point where I have realized my voice and my advocacy, whether it's for my country or my people, is going to be tied to economic gain. And I think as long as there's no economic inclusion, you never become a part of the conversation. And so I'm putting my money where my mouth is and investing in things in my community with the hope and with the and not just be telling people you can do fine. If you work hard, you can get whatever you want. But it's investing in. So my mom started a company. We are both shareholders in the company, but we are very deliberate about hiring people who are we have a farm. And so we hire people who are in the area. We make sure we hire women. The yogurt business that my mom has, 90% of our supply chain is now women, right? Because we've seen how women work so hard. We come from Nyanza and Migori area. Women work so hard in that community, and it's the ones who are put down the most. And so we have been very deliberate. We're like, all our milk suppliers are going to be women. All our quality person, our sales lead is a woman. So we've been very deliberate about that. And I've seen the effect of that, where somebody who before used to come to our house and we had to help pay for school fees, and we employ that person, and now they're comfortably paying school fees, and now they're comfortably be able to do so much more for their family. I think that's where my next, if there's a next, that's where it's going to be. I want to be able to put my money where my mouth is and economically empower people. And so that's something that has brought me joy, and I think about it all the time. And I'm trying to research what are the businesses that are young people doing in Kenya. Who can I invest in? What person has an idea? You want to start a motorcycle business? I'll give you the money. So I'm just trying to go into places where I want to see people become economically empowered, because I think that's the only way as a country, as a continent, we're going to get out of where we are, is when we have money and we can be a voice in the global market. So that's where it's going to be. And in terms of how I'm making that decision, it's fully just I'm listening to my gut and what fulfills me. So that's the long and short of it.
Wow, following your gut, that's a good one. That's advice everyone should take. So let me just ask the last question, one that I guess most people have asked. I'm really sorry we're not able to take all the questions, but let me just take this for the last one. So do you take time off your career, since you say you are career oriented?
Do I take time off? Okay, so, and I know some of my friends are watching this, so I have to be accountable. So I need to do better when it comes to taking a break. So like, I think 2 years ago, last year, 2 years ago, I kept saying, I'm going to take a sabbatical and just 3 months, 6 months, chill out. I've still been talking about this sabbatical. I haven't gone on it yet because I'm like, I've just moved to a new team, so let me do this for now. But let me just do this for now. I feel guilty that I haven't done it, but at the same time, I also recognize that I do get joy from seeing actionable things. And there's a word for this, I forget. But if maybe let me use an analogy for child development, because I have a little niece, and I noticed that she doesn't like games for the sake of playing games. She wants a game where I put this thing together and there's an outcome. Great. And so if you're just telling her, just play with that thing, and she's like, am I building? If you're not building something, she just doesn't care for it. And I think I may be that way in an adult form, where even if I take 6 months off, that 6 months I'm going to be side hustling with my mom, building businesses. So I've learned how to now try and plug in time in everything. I relax a lot now. I'm clear about when I go see my family. I see my mom and my siblings. I'm trying to be in the moment. Maybe that's a better word to use. So we really enjoy talking about all random political things, and really like music, and really like food. And like, so when I'm spending time with my family, I'm spending time with my family. And I am doing more in terms of enjoying also time off. Again, this is probably being raised in a Kenyan household where we never went on a holiday as kids. And even as an adult, it's only last year that I stopped lying to my mom when I'm on vacation, because I'd feel guilty, because I'm like, oh my God, I'm here in Greece enjoying my vacation, and my mom struggled to pay for us school fees. And that guilt lives with you. But I had to get to a point to say, hey, man, I've worked hard. This time off is necessary, and mental health is important. So you realize if you break down, like then, and then what? So being able to like wellness and caring for your mind, I think is important. And I've learned now that part of my wellness practice and process is interweaved in my work. So if I'm doing something that I feel is benefiting my soul and my community, because that's how it's benefiting my soul, to me that is part of wellness. And I'm trying, and wellness not necessarily I'm going to the spa and then I come to work. No, it means that also as I come to work, I want to make sure that I am working in somewhere that's not toxic, and I'm not stressed in terms of I hate people. And I just, if I wake up in the morning, I'm like, why am I here? So I have to make sure that I interspace those things. It's a work in progress, but I want to tell everyone downtime is good, but also put your mental health in the forefront. That's something we don't talk too much about as Kenyans or as Africans. But yeah, anyway, anything that can help nurture your mental health, I'm a key advocate for that, and it's something I am also working on.
Great. Thank you so much, Jackie. I can tell from the way you talk that you really love your job. And that's something everyone should take from today's session. We are really grateful for your time. We would love to have you in all of the other preceding events. And we really, really thank you. Really grateful from the DevFest team. Now, if you'd like to link up with Jackie, anytime you could link up with her on Twitter. Let me just send her credentials on the chat.
Yeah.
And thank you so much. So I will hand this over back to Alela, if you're there. Thank you, Jackie.
Thanks.
Hi, everyone. Sorry, apparently I was on mute. Technical difficulties. So great. Our first panelist for the day is Jerop Kipruto. Jerop is a software engineer at Google. A little bit about Jerop. So Jerop is a software engineer at Google in the New York City. She works on a cloud CI/CD, specifically contributing to the Tecton project. Previously, she was a software engineering and computer science from MIT. She was born and raised in the North Rift region of Kenya. So it's good to know that she's one of us. Come on, if we could give virtual applauses to that, as Gaty will be adding Jerop to the platform. Our next panelist is Caroline Muthambiri. So Caroline is a corporate and operations engineer at Google. And a little bit about her. So she's a corporate engineer. I've already said that. She previously held the positions of IT resident at Google's Dublin office and system administrator at IPS Kenya Limited. Caroline launched her career in tech when she interned at Lantech Africa Limited, an IT infrastructure solutions company in Nairobi, where she held the position of a network engineer. Carol holds a master's in computer science from the University of Hertfordshire with a specialization in distributed systems and networks, and bachelor's of science in information technology from KCA University. She prides herself as an analytical thinker, a problem solver who enjoys crafting solutions to everyday challenges. She is an avid reader and seeks diverse knowledge and cultural experiences through travel. Carol, when you are added to the call, kindly tell us these amazing places that you have toured. Our next panelist is going to be Bernice Kibet, who is a networks engineer at Google. A little bit about Bernice. She is a graduate of the Jomo Kenyatta University of Agriculture and Technology with a bachelor's in telecommunications and information engineering. Currently, she is a networks engineer at Google, supporting the Google Global IP and Optical Network. Previously, she was an engineer at Safaricom Limited, and she's passionate about technology, especially how tech can transform lives and create impact in different spaces. So Bernice is also into internet governance and development, and previously an Internet Society Fellow, as well as an IETF Fellow. She is also a mentor to many. Bernice, when you're added, I hope you're going to pick those to mentor, and if possible, mentor all of us. Any extra mentor is always welcome. Our final panelist is going to be Caroline Ganga. So Caroline is a Kenyan-born lover of data and math. She has focused her career on leveraging statistical and data analysis to influence business strategy across different roles. She started as a statistician in banking before moving to tech, where she worked as a data analyst before pivoting to her current role as a program manager for Google Maps. Her recent work is focused on working with engineers to create and implement processes for the maintenance of machine learning models. When not working, Caroline enjoys reading, eating, and working out. I love that there's eating there because I really love eating. So at least we have something in common. Okay, so we will have Caroline on the platform with us, and our panel session is going to get started. Okay, so great. Let's start with the first question, and I think this is going to be to all of you. What was your journey into technology? And to get started, I guess we'll get started with Jerop. So what was your journey like into technology?
Can you hear me?
Yes, you can.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you for inviting me to this panel, and thank you for organizing this, Alela. It was shared, I actually grew up in Kenya and moved to Cambridge, Massachusetts for my undergraduate studies at MIT. And while in college, we usually have a month during winter break where you can do anything. And during my freshman year, that's the first time that I took an introduction to Python course, and it was actually my first time coding. And it was quite intimidating because everyone else at MIT basically knew how to code, but it was a new field for me, and I was really excited to learn. And something to note here is that in MIT and other US colleges, you're admitted to the school, and it's up to you to decide what to do. You're not admitted to do a particular course like how it is in Kenya. So I realized that I really enjoyed the computer science classes, and also realizing that there's a lot that you can do with CS that doesn't require or like has minimal inputs compared to other engineering courses that I was considering. Like chemical engineering, you need a wet lab, but in CS you just need your laptop, probably spin up a cluster, and you can get going with things. So with that, then I took on more computer science classes, and I was also curious about the hardware part of things. So I took electrical engineering classes as well. So over time, I just found myself pursuing electrical engineering and computer science. Over time, I took internships and tried to explore the industry. I did internships in Singapore, in Wall Street, in a startup in Nairobi, in the Silicon Valley. And through all these internships, I was able to discover my interest in systems work and gravitated towards infrastructure side of things. And now I'm at Google Cloud, specifically building Kubernetes native framework for creating continuous integration and delivery systems.
Wow. Interesting. I think we'll get to how you got into MIT, because this is maybe something that a lot of us were like, when I grow up, I want to go to MIT. And then you actually went to MIT. So I'm like, how? We would like to know that. So next we will have Banis Kibet. So Banis.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Leila, for inviting me here. So I'm Banis Kibet. So my journey to tech actually was out of curiosity. Once I finished my high school, I just wanted to do something that was more exciting, something that would be dynamic on an everyday basis. And interesting enough, I just did my online research, and that's how I found myself actually doing telecommunications engineering. And over time, during the course, because I studied in Nairobi, and I was able to take up different internship positions within companies in Nairobi, as well as get involved in issues on internet development and internet governance. And I think that is what kind of exposed me more into technology, especially in the networks field. And over time, it's been interesting, and that's how I've actually stayed and remained in technology. I'm a recent graduate myself. I graduated in 2018. I worked for Safaricom for about 2 years. And I joined Google early this year in April. So ideally, I'm still a new Googler, but I'm excited to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Banis. So when you say you got into technology out of curiosity, I am remembering, I thought curiosity killed the cat. Now, in your case, curiosity got you into tech.
Yeah.
That's what I like. Okay, so next we're going to be having Caroline Ganga telling us about her journey into tech.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I guess similar to everybody, my journey into tech was more, I guess, just trying things. So I always liked math. Like growing up, math was my favorite subject. And when I went to college, I was 100% sure I was going to stay in school forever, become a professor. That was going to be my journey. And then I studied math and statistics in school. And then I remember after I finished my master's, somebody just sent an email to like the school email list to apply for jobs in banking. So I applied for the job, and so I was like, okay, let me just go work for a year. I'll put my PhD admission on hold. I can always go back for it. So my plan was to just, work for a year and then go back. And then it turned out that I actually really enjoyed working. So I worked in banking for about 4.5 years. And then I wanted to travel more, and I was working in the US at the time. I wanted to travel more and I wanted to leave the US. So I was really just looking for any company that would hire me, that would, allow me to travel and allow me to work outside the United States. And, that's how Google happened. So I used to work in this team called Trust and Safety, which is the team that's responsible for creating and enforcing the policies for what we allow on Google products, right? So what kind of ads do we allow on YouTube or on AdWords? What are the policies that enable us to allow that? So I was working as a data analyst there. And then I transitioned to be a program manager. So I actually was Jackie, Raj is my old teammate, and she's actually the one who referred me for my current role. So yeah.
Wow. Okay. So you wanted to travel, and you are actually traveling, or?
Yes.
Can you like put us in your suitcase the next time? Because maybe some of us also want to travel. Give us some tips on how to get there. So our final panelist is Caroline Muthambiri, and we would like to hear about your journey into technology.
Okay. My journey also happens to be something I stumbled upon. After high school, I actually wanted to be a journalist, and I knew in my mind that I'm gonna be the best writer because I used to write the best compositions in high school. And there was a year in between high school and deciding what to do. That went too quickly. and I was a farmer for 3 years, for those 3 years. And afterwards, I found something that was happening at KU, Kenyatta University. So I joined a small course that was about computing and networks. And the course kind of grabbed my attention. And from then on, everything has gravitated towards tech. I did a bit of internship in Nairobi, so one farm called WomenTech Africa, which helped me actually understand more about corporate networks, infrastructure. And after that, I became assistant administrator, still in Nairobi. And one time I was visiting the US for a conference, it's called Grasshopper Conference. And during this time, I found Google having a booth, and they were looking for more women in the team that I joined. So I interviewed at this conference, and that's how I joined Google. I started off in Dublin, so I know Jackie very well, and I know Caroline also very well. And then after 2 years in Dublin, I moved to Zurich, where I am right now as a corporate operations engineer. And within all this time, I would say like I studied, my undergrad was, those evening classes in Nairobi where you work as a systems administrator, but in the evening at 5 p.m. you're in class. I went to KCA University, that's how I studied. And I also did the same for my computer science degree at the University of Hertfordshire. I was working during the day, but in the evening I'm doing this course, and this is how everything has kind of come together.
Wow, really amazing. I was actually a Grasshopper scholar last year, and while you are stumbling on technology, I think I'm stumbling on rocks, like, you know. Okay, so this brings me to my next question. It's really amazing to hear the journeys that you have all had when venturing into tech, or how you got started. So which makes me ask, what are some of the challenges that you have faced in this journey into technology that you chose to take? And are these some of the challenges that you believe other women can actually relate to? So I'm going to post this to Caroline Ganga. Yes, you.
I think probably the one that most people would relate to, and Raj brought this up in her keynote as well, right, is as imposter syndrome. And partly as, I think partly as a result of our upbringing where, again, at least I was brought up, don't ask too many questions, be thankful for your job, be thankful for what you have. But then when you go into a company where you're just being expected to say your voice and people are expecting you to push back, right? That can be intimidating. And then at the same time, just kind of being in a position is like, oh my gosh, this person went to this amazing school. This person has this amazing background. What am I doing here? Sometimes like having those feelings. I think that getting over that is probably the biggest, one of the biggest challenges that I've had to overcome. And in terms of how I have overcome it, like it's definitely continues to be a work in progress. But I think the biggest thing is, again, what was mentioned in the keynote, like trusting that I've been put here for a reason, right? Like the fact that I made it through this whole process wasn't a mistake, wasn't a fluke. And what I am bringing I am bringing something to the table. And so I just kind of have to trust it. And like, what's the worst that could happen, right? Like if the worst that could happen is like, you say like, oh, no, we don't agree with you. No, you're not doing a good job. Then at least I'll take that feedback and continue to learn. But yeah, that's what I would say.
Wow. Okay. Thank you so much, Caroline. So I think I'll post the same question. I will take two of you to answer the same question, and then the rest will answer a different question. So Jerop, what are some of the challenges that you have faced that you believe that others can relate to?
I agree with the same thing. I think across the board, imposter syndrome is a problem that many people face. One thing that was helpful for me, especially like joining MIT, where most people tend to have coded since they were 5 years old. And even when I started working, and what I learned over time is that these people who seem like they know everything, at some point they had to learn it somewhere. And this is my time to learn. And therefore I should be jumping at all of these opportunities and learn and realize like this is a growth process. And it's not like they were just born with that knowledge in their mind. So when I realized that and give myself space to grow, jump at opportunities to continue learning, then I was able to be able to handle feeling like an imposter and just realizing this is a growth process, a learning process, and these people did not just know it out of nowhere, that they learned, and lean into that to also learn myself. But the other thing that I want to bring up is something called glue work. I don't know how many of people here have watched a talk by Tanya Riley about glue work, which is something that tends to affect women a lot. This glue work is things that need to happen to make tech work, but it's not really like things in the critical path. For example, like writing documentation, some people may not, let me just describe it as like things that need to happen that are not really rewarded in the job, or are not in that critical path. And at some point, someone has to do it. But there are statistics showing that most times when there's this glue work, non-promotable work, non-rewarded work, women volunteer more than men, because of how I think we grow up to show leadership and everything. So 48% more women do this. And even when managers are asked to give, to choose someone to do this glue work, they tend to ask 44% more women than men. And I think these things then, when it's time for promotions or it's time to be given bigger projects, then women would be passed over because like you're doing these things that are happening on the side. And I'm not saying you shouldn't do it. I think what I'm suggesting is like have awareness of like what kind of projects are you taking on? Is it work that is in the critical path? Is it work that are in the OKRs or like what is important to the team? And make sure that you're on that line yourself. And that this glue work that needs to happen eventually, that it's shared fairly across the team, and that you aren't taking up the burden for everyone, or that you're not you're not doing the you're not the one taking on that load so that others can work on the more important projects, that you're doing your fair share of glue work, but you're also taking on work on the critical path, and that's how you can get to progress and move on in your career.
If I could add something to what Gerald just said around like it being a learning process for everybody and you have to learn at some point. The other thing I realized is that nobody has it figured out. Like everybody is figuring out as they go along. Just people are able to fake it and like, you know, have more confidence to like, oh yeah, like speak their way through. And so like learning to be comfortable with saying unfinished thoughts or presenting things that are still a work in progress, because literally nobody has it figured out. That has helped me a lot as well.
Okay, so thank you so much, Caroline, for adding something on top. So to you, Caroline Wuthambiri, what are some of, how is it like for you being a woman in technology? So like, how does it feel for you, like being maybe the only woman in a room sometimes? I think that's something that some of us women have actually experienced.
I will give an example to start with. When I joined the team in Dublin, so I joined as an IT resident. So I know our role is actually to take care of Google IT infrastructure and support. And I joined an EMEA team that had 30 plus techies, and I was the only woman. And I didn't realize that this was the case until we went on an offsite. And this offsite, we were to share rooms, and then it turned out there was only one woman, so they were not sharing the room with any other person, and everybody was like, oh wow. But that to me was a sign that within the whole of EMEA, I was the only person in the room, literally. So this space sometimes feels a little bit secluded, and I have to point out to the keynote that Jackie gave about having women around you who can uplift you and can help you through the journey. When I moved to Dublin, Jackie moved there, I think a year after. Even though I was alone in my team, I had a community of friends around me who were women, And sometimes we could go through tickets, talk about things within teams that are different, how to navigate a new country, a new space. Because to me, I was coming from Nairobi to Dublin to a new team to Google. So the isolating factor is one big thing that comes around when you're alone in such a space. But I would say there are groups and institutions that are helping more women to figure things out in tech. And that's what I'm really excited about, because there are conferences like GHC, which are focused on women. There are spaces where women are being recruited. So I can see the curve growing. So to say this, like, I was the only one within EMEA within my team. But the next year, well, another girl joined, 2 more people joined. So it's not isolating anymore. But it still is a challenge because, as again, you still want to get your voice heard, and sometimes imposter syndrome comes in, which I have to mention again, and you have to be kinder to yourself as well.
Thank you so much. It's really important to know that we need to be kinder to ourselves, not so harsh to ourselves. So, Banis, this is to you. You have joined Google at a point where I think many people were like, I'm going to be canceling 2020. So I'm going to assume 2020 never happened. But here you are joining Google. So what was it like for you? And what are some of the things that actually made you think that I'm a good fit for Google, or I should be applying into a role as a software engineer?
Thank you so much. So how my journey basically started into Google was I got a referral from one of the Googlers during an event. And when I now started working on my interviews, my current role wasn't especially, the skill set that was required isn't something that I actually had before, but I just had 50% of it, but I had to give my best. So one thing that I told myself is I'll give my best. I will give the best of my ability, and that's it. I gave my best, and the best gave me the job. And now I was to begin my job in Google in the March this year. And interesting enough, that is when everything went in disarray. And one thing I would say was the support of my team, my managers, my friends, and fellow Googlers has really been helpful in terms of actually adapting, being able to onboard remotely, train remotely, and now actually working remotely has really been helpful. I think, as Caroline said, having people to support you, especially if you have supportive managers, supportive teams, and people supporting you around, has really been exciting. And as Caroline still insisted, as well as the earlier speakers, imposter syndrome is real. I remember when I joined my team, the first month, I would hear all the new words, all the acronyms, and I was like, will I ever understand these things? And I think I had 2 options: either to fall into that imposter syndrome and actually say, now I'm lost, and why did I get myself here? But I also had the choice of, you know what, every day is a learning process. Get out there, and because by the time you get that job, it means that they believed in your skill, and this was something that they would actually they'd actually benefit from. So you have just to leave that imposter syndrome behind and just give your best. Like, every day is a learning process. Allow yourself to make mistakes. Allow yourself to learn, and with time, every day is a learning process. So there's no one who will ever say, I have learned everything. So allow yourself to learn and actually know that you can do it, and challenge yourself, because we always think that we can't do it. But if you challenge yourself and go forth for it, there's so much information out here. If you actually sit and handle it, then you'll become the best.
To you, Jerop, you mentioned that you use Kubernetes as part of what you do. Would you mind to expound more on why Kubernetes? What made you choose to use these technologies? And I'm sure all of you are going to be answering the next question, the same question. So think about it.
Okay, sounds good. So for me, I use Kubernetes. Or let me say, I don't use Kubernetes. I build something that is Kubernetes native, so that other people can be able to use Kubernetes well. So I work on a project called Tekton. For people who don't know Kubernetes, Kubernetes is an open source system, mostly from Google, that is used for automating deploying, scaling, management of containerized applications. So it's just making containers and scheduling and managing all that. So out of Kubernetes, a project called Tekton was spun off, which is what is used for and that's what I contribute to, which is a framework that is Kubernetes native. So it uses components from Kubernetes to allow for building of continuous integration and delivery systems. So with this, so like by default, because it's Kubernetes native, then we use Kubernetes. And honestly speaking, Kubernetes is the industry leader in terms of the automation and scaling and management of containers. So that's like the go-to option that we have. But even as I was joining the team, that is like the framework was based on Kubernetes, so that is the default choice that we're making. But beyond that, it's an industry leader, and I think would be interesting for most of you to go try out, go see what it's all about, and explore that side of tech. And then Tekton itself is also an open source project. And as some of you may know, continuous integration and delivery is about the build, deploy, and delivery process or pipeline. And while I don't write the pipelines, I write the tools that people can use to build those pipelines. And given that it's open source, it's used by hundreds of companies, and we have hundreds of contributors into this project. And it's very exciting to work on a cutting edge solution that was just started 2 years ago, but like is really influencing the whole industry, and across the board, many cloud providers, IBM Tech, like even Apple, like across the board beyond Google, that this is a tool that is used by many people. So I think it would be a great opportunity for you to all look into open source, look at Kubernetes, look at Tekton, and other like cutting edge open source projects that are welcoming to the community and could be an opportunity for you to learn by contributing to these projects. And I would speak for Tekton that we're very welcoming. So if you're interested in contributing and learning and actually like getting your hands dirty, please feel free to join us there, join the Slack channel. You can find all the information online.
Okay, so thank you so much, Jerome. While you were telling us to get our hands dirty, somebody has reminded us to wash our hands. So yeah, so I think let's hear from Caroline Muthambiri, the technologies that you're using, why you chose them, and if you'd like to share more, then we'll have Caroline Ganga and finish up with Banis.
Okay, so just to reiterate a little bit, I started off as a systems administrator in Nairobi, and I was working mostly with Microsoft infrastructure. And all I knew was how to support Microsoft products. That's what was available in the market, and easily like you could find documentation about this. But when I moved to Google, I realized that there are many other platforms within Google and being used within Google, and also available open source. So for example, I had to adapt from actually using a specific, like a Microsoft, like Windows laptop to a Linux laptop. And the most amazing thing for me was that I could actually customize all my Linux laptops to however I needed it. It was just configuration files. So I learned how Linux works, and started building slowly like my own Linux distro, like my own flavor of Linux, try to customize it. It's still a project ongoing, but that's one technology that I felt I didn't have much exposure to, that I got exposure within Google, and now I'm actually can do it as a personal project and also enjoy doing it. That's on a work perspective. I have to say also on a personal perspective, I have an app that I actually, and technology that I love nowadays is just keeping notes. I find that my head is always having so many thoughts running around. I'm always thinking something, and sometimes you don't have a pen and a pencil and a book to write down your thoughts. So I've been using Google Keep just to write my notes down and to keep my thoughts. And whenever I feel something flash my head, I just write it down. If I'm curious about something, I want to check it out later, I write it down. And I'm able to kind of structure my thoughts whenever I write them down. And I find like technology-wise, Google Keep is really good at helping you organize your random thoughts. So those are the two things that I am absolutely loving at the moment, and I'm happy to continue using.
Yeah, so I'll go next. So I guess I can give the perspective from a data side, I guess data science, data analysis side of things. So I think if you think of like the data lifecycle, there is where you spend majority of your time, which is pulling data, manipulating data to make it something that is useful for analysis. And there, SQL, like regardless of which company you go to, SQL is going to be the technology that you're using there. So when I started out, like I think that my company that I was at first was using like Oracle's version, and then I moved to Google. I had to learn Google SQL. But really, once you know the basics, it's really just kind of some adjustments here and there. So I think anybody interested in any sort of data analysis, data science, SQL is a must. And then there is then like the visualization side of things. So we have a few internal Google visualization platforms that we use, but like some of them are open source. So Google Data Studio, if anybody has used this dashboarding platform, is one that I leverage a lot for creating reports or creating dashboards, a way of visualizing metrics. And then there is for actual analysis, Collaboratory. So I think Google Collaboratory is an external, it's also open source product. And it allows you can do, I think, SQL, Python coding. It's like lots of documentation out there available. So these will be the ones I would say for, so analysis, SQL, and Colab as well, where it's mostly Python plus SQL, and then Data Studio for visualization. And then you can't really get away from like tricks like Google Sheets or spreadsheets. At the end of the day, you can try and get away from them as much as possible, but I haven't found a way to escape them. So I definitely use that a lot.
I'm actually shocked that you're looking for a way to escape them. Okay, Banis?
Yeah, so for me, I think I'll speak from a network perspective as well as from a transport. By transport perspective, I mean from a fiber perspective, because that is exactly what I do in terms of IP routing as well as transport, which is DWDM. So something interesting that actually I'm learning now is the way we have, or something that I'm learning from my new role at Google as compared to my previous roles, is the way we have the way different multi-vendor environments kind of interact. And because being my previous role or my previous experiences was basically one or two vendors, but here I'm working with a multi-vendor network, both from a transport side as well as from an IP side. And all these kind of vendors kind of interact from an automation perspective, where configs are pushed and you're able to have databases which are actually storing these configurations and things like that. So that has been quite interesting, and also being able to learn the different open standards that are actually used with the different vendors, because for this interoperability, there are communities that actually work on these, the ITU, the IEEE, the IETF, being able to come up with open standards that would actually allow this. And even in technology, as things move forward, I think this bit of interoperability will kind of keep continuing improving. So even I think with people who do development and anything, always try and put it from an open standard perspective to be able to actually have it interoperate with different vendors and different environments.
As you're waiting for Lela, can I answer a question on the chat? Someone had asked where we can find projects to contribute to. For open source, there's something going on that you may know about called Hacktoberfest. Go check it out. I don't know if it seems I can't comment on the chat, but search Hacktoberfest and you'd find there like it's being learned. It's a project for learning and contributing to open source that's being done by DigitalOcean, and I think they have rewards for whatever amount of open source contributions you do. But I hope that's helpful for the person who asked that. Yeah, exactly, for contributing to open source. And then someone asked, oh, thank you for helping clarify the spelling of Kubernetes, but someone had asked, what does one need to get into being a cloud practitioner? So there's two parts of it. So if you are interested in like using cloud and using it to build whatever system, then you can take on like Coursera courses that focuses on Kubernetes, so like how to be a user. But alternatively, if you're interested in being in the side of building things or building the cloud tools or services, then you can start by contributing to some of these projects like Kubernetes, or seek opportunities in companies, particularly asking to be put in infrastructure teams or on the system teams that they have within the companies that focus on like building the infrastructure system, which most likely will be on the cloud side of things. So there are two ways to go about it depending on the approach that we want. But hope Hack Oktoberfest would help that person and probably some of you to like get more experience and try out different open source projects.
Okay, so thank you so much, Rob, for that. So this is a final question. I'm joining as Giti. There is a joke that my village people have become so active, they don't want me to be online. So there's so many interruptions on my end. So they're very, very active right now. So a final question to all of you. What are some of the learnings that you have made over time, ever since you started your career into tech, or just your journey into tech, or this whole swapping thing? So what are some of the learnings that you have made? And to get started, we'll start with you, Jerome, because you're already speaking.
Yeah, I was answering questions. Sorry to take over. So the learnings that I've made, I would say number one is that the manager is key. Like whatever opportunity that you're trying to look for, the number one criteria in my perspective is the manager, because they determine everything that happens about your journey in that company. Like what kinds of projects are you being assigned? Are they important projects to the team? Are you on the critical path? Are you on the path to promotion? Like your compensation, everything. So I would say above money, above the team, above the project, like spend some time talking to you, who's going to be your manager, and get to understand how do they give feedback, what do they think about growth, and just get to dig in and see if this is someone that you'd like to spend time with and work for, because they honestly determine everything. So manager above everything else is what I would say. Secondly, invest in your mentors and sponsors and circle of peers relationships. Mentors are important for a particular space that you're in. For example, if you're trying to grow from one level to another, or you're trying to move from one tech stack to another, look for a mentor who can help you in that journey at that specific time. And over time, you can change up your mentors. But sponsors are people within that space that you're in who can advocate for you, who can fight for you for your growth. So make sure that you have those people as well, and spend time building those relationships, communicate with them often, and get them invested in your journey. But most importantly, my perspective is that circle of peers, as even was mentioned in the earlier talk. Who are the people in the industry? Who are your friends? Who you talk to about your experiences? Who you share your journeys together with? Because they really help you. Like the times that you're feeling imposter syndrome, they would gas you up. There are times that you're, I'm not sure if I can go to this conference and talk about these things. They're like, oh, you can do it. Just like you want those people who can champion you, especially for those times when you're not sure if something is too above your scope. But even like simple day-to-day things, like if you get an offer and if you don't know if it's like a fair offer, you can lean into your peers and just share the numbers and have that transparency with each other. So I would also advise to invest in that circle of people that you lean into within your field.
Thank you so much, Jerome. Caroline Ganga, what about you?
So I think Jerome covered quite a few of the main learnings there. Right? So I think one thing I would say is there's more than one way to grow. I don't know how many people are the same as me, where you kind of had this idea that growth looks like being promoted, or growth looks like going to the next level, or doing this and doing that, but that's actually not necessarily the case, right? Like there's more than one way to grow, whether it's learning new skills, getting new opportunities. So, moving to a completely different team or role that teaches you skills that you didn't have before. So being open to like a wider definition of growth and focusing on that, I think that would be that would be one thing. The other thing I would say is there's always room for there's always room to negotiate, and this is something I think I learned, and I think this is connected to the other thing where it's like the best time to look for a job. I know that this is not always going to be the case, but actually the best time to look for a job is when you're comfortable in your current one, because when you're under a lot of pressure, right, then you are, I guess there's pressure to maybe take something that may not be ideal. But actually, when you're in a situation where you're comfortable, you don't have to move, things are okay. That's actually maybe the best time to start thinking about what the next step could be, because it's like because then you feel less pressure to actually say no to things. And then when you are in those positions to look for new opportunities, like there's always room to negotiate. And I think this is something I've learned from one of my brothers, and actually mostly the men that I work with, and seeing how they negotiate, whether situations, salaries, and you're like, oh no, but I'm so thankful for having a job. I'm so thankful that they gave me the offer. Like no, like negotiate is always room for that. And the worst they can say is no, right? Like the worst that can happen is that they say no. So I think I'll go with those two. I guess Bernice or Carol, like you guys can go next.
Yeah, I think I'll go next. So I think I'll just point out three things. One of it may have just been maybe a cliche, but I think it's the fact that failure is part of the journey. I think don't give up. Like you will fail severally, but let that not make you give up. Just keep on. That there's light at the end of the tunnel. And secondly is make your voice known. Like don't keep quiet. I know we have a tendency of the imposter syndrome coming in, the fact that I can't say this, I can't do this because I can't do it. But you know what? Maybe someone is watching you. That point that you want to say, or that particular thing you actually think may not be the right thing, maybe the point that people are looking for, maybe something that can make a difference. So always try as much as possible and speak up. Give your point of view. It's whether wrong, whether right. Just make it known and be open to learning. And thirdly is be your best and always give your best in everything. Whatever results you get, as long as you gave your best and you're at your best, I think that's enough satisfaction among any other thing. I think those are the three key things that I would actually say. And I think Cherop also highlighted something about your networks and your community and the people around you. Build people who grow you. Build communities, or be part of communities that you actually contribute to, communities that you can make a difference in. And I think overall, yeah, just live a life that makes you be the best version of yourself.
Thank you so much, Bernice. What about you, Caroline?
Okay, so learnings I've made over the years. I would say the first one is most of what has been mentioned, and that is like believing in yourself, like the step that you're making actually matters. I've always found that I've had self-doubt a lot. Whenever I'm about to do something, I start asking myself, what if this might happen? But I've found that being more confident in my thoughts and knowing I've exhausted and this is the best I can give at that point. Sometimes even when you're in situations like you're in meetings, you're giving your ideas, like you're giving your best. That's one of the things that I've learned over the years. The other thing is seeking out people who are in a position that you want to be in. Like if you see like you would wish to be at a level like that, a level of this director, you see they're doing good things, or you've heard about this person, they're doing amazing things. Like all it needs sometimes is just to send an email, just to reach out. I always felt like I was never good enough to actually seek out these people, and I had been in places where I was in close proximity to these people, and now when I look back, I think to myself, if I actually sought that person at that time when I was close to them. For example, like I was in meetings, I could have asked them a question. I could have known more on what they're doing. So not being afraid to seek out people who are in a positions that you admire or you're looking out to. And also cultivating, and this is my main one, which I absolutely love, is cultivating a curious mind. Like whenever you see something happen, the curiosity of why does something work this way? Why is it not that way? That helps you with problem-solving skills, which Jackie had mentioned is quite important in the tech industry, because you're mostly solving problems or trying to achieve something. So cultivating a curious mind for problem solving, that's my bad and most important, I believe, of what I've learned.
Okay, so thank you so much, Caroline. We'll take a few questions from the attendees to just get to hear what exactly do they have to ask you. So if you have any questions on the audience, just post it on the chat section on YouTube and we will be able to highlight it. Jerome, are you able to hear, or is this my network?
Yeah. Yes, I can hear you now.
Oh,
you asked something?
Okay, my network is so bad. So I was asking if you would share the link to the open source projects that you talked about, where people can contribute to the projects. Yeah.
I'm not sure if I can comment. Could you send me a link to where I can? I can't comment on this StreamYard. Do I need a link to somewhere else?
No, you can post it on the YouTube link. So we'll be sharing that with you. But if you could just mention it, then maybe they can look it up.
Okay. So you wanted me to share a link for the open source project?
Yeah, where they can contribute. Somebody asked for it.
Hello?
Yes.
Yeah. So I mentioned that there's Hacktoberfest by DigitalOcean, which would link you to many open source projects. I think someone posted the spelling on the chat, but there's also like you can look up Kubernetes, and there's Tekton, Tekton. But Hacktoberfest, I think, would be a smooth way to get introduced into contributing to open source. And this also doubles down to what Vanessa was saying about looking for opportunities to grow and learning and take a chance, go explore, contribute to open source. And even beyond that, like, I think you had asked a question earlier, Alela, about like how I got into MIT, and that all had to do with taking a chance that like many Kenyans had intended to go to do what's the degree? Surgery, like BC. I forget how it's called, the short name for the bachelor's in like surgery in UON, but taking a chance on yourself, applying to these opportunities. You can apply to MIT. I think right now they don't even have GRE requirements, the test requirements that they need, and just having faith and taking that chance and putting in your application and pursuing these opportunities. But for open source, check Hacktoberfest, but you can go directly to Tekton or Kubernetes and just take a chance on yourself.
Great, thank you so much. So we can move into another question. Can starters also apply for the Oktoberfest? I mean, someone who's just starting off.
Anyone can do it. Like, and I think it's even meant more so for the starters or people who are new to the industry. So anyone can do it.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm really sorry we won't be able to answer all the questions on the chat, so we have to finalize the panel session. I would really like to say thank you to all the panelists who showed up today. Thank you to everyone who made time to come to the event. We're looking forward to hosting you ladies and even more of you on other events, other preceding events. We thank you so much, and we've come to the end of our session. We are entirely grateful as the WTM team, and we wish you guys all the best in each and everything that you're doing from now henceforth. And we are looking forward to DevFest tomorrow. If any of you are willing to join the session, you are very, very welcome. So, with that said, thank you so much, everyone. And we've come to the end of the session. You can leave at your own pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you
Bye,
for having
everyone.
us. Bye.